Outer Orange.
It is a beautiful evening, romantic dinner, and then suddenly you get handed a Meer's present. Welcome back to the channel. We are here to discuss Meer, and I wanted to talk to you guys about this a newer version of the deck, as I feel like this deck gets so little representation, yet it is such a cheap deck and easy to build, yet very fun and engrossing deck. And I wanted to talk to you guys about it because I think we need to revamp and revisit Meer, as this deck is just all around one of my favorite decks to play in Twinkle Melodies. So let's talk about it. Here I am. Here's Meer. As always, we gotta do our tradition deck box. This is actually a no life, no game deck box. During the time when I picked up Meer, I actually had not enough deck boxes, so I went ahead on Amazon and bought some of the Ultra Pro super cheap deck boxes. That's what you'll be seeing right here. And I picked these up for like literally a total of like $5 max. I picked up a bunch of these so I could build out all these Twinkle Melody decks without having to spend like a crazy amount of money. So that's what I did with this. And then for the sleeves, I actually did a similar thing where I got these on Amazon for pretty cheap. This is actually one of my favorite workoids. This is Megamine Luca, and out of all the Hatsune Miku stuff, if you guys know Hatsune Miku, there's actually a low-key singer named Luca, and she's actually one of my favorites. Hopefully one day I can get a nice little figurine of her, as I think she's adorable. As you guys know, I like the color pink. So, and I thought with this, you know, aesthetic of Meer and stuff, it just fits kind of perfectly. So, actual deck profile. So of course we're starting out with 4 copies of Sweetest Sister Meer, and yes, if you are a true person and understand the love for swimsuits in any form, you'll respect me and my slight degeneracy here, as I did get the swimsuit version SP pretty cheap, so I picked it up. Anyway, I actually have all versions. In case you guys aren't aware, I really love Meer. It's one of my favorite decks. So, Sweetest Sister Meer. Let's go ahead and discuss her skill real quick, as it is extremely long. And let me find one where it's a little easier to read. Pretty much, I'll read it to you. It says at the beginning of your main phase, so pretty much right after you ride and you don't stride. So this can't work with premium too well unless you're like me and you create some weird vanilla deck. What definitely didn't do that. But anyway, so you pick up one of these at the beginning of your main phase, pretty much right when you're about to start putting units down, doing whatever, doing your skills, like this, you get one of these, essentially. And then at the beginning of your battle phase, you reveal any number of your gifts, and if you reveal 2 or more, you get the option to counterblast and heal a card. So you pretty much take a card from your damage and you heal it. It doesn't have to meet any weird requirements. You just have to have two of these beautiful presents. As I love to, I'm a gifter. If you guys don't know, I love giving out gifts to people. And in this deck likes to just give me gifts, which is different, but I appreciate it. Her other skill with these presents is, though, for every single one revealed, your rear guards specifically get an extra 5k. So if you have 1, then that means all your rear guards are getting 5k. If you have 2, that means all your rear guards are getting 10k, and so on and so forth. So if you're holding 4 of these, each one of your rear guards will be 20k power. Very, very interesting. But here comes my favorite part, probably about this entire engine. She has a once per turn Vanguard skill. It says Counterblast, Soul Blast. Look at top 2 cards of your deck, and you may choose to call one. And then whatever you don't do, if you don't call anything, you just put it back on top in any order. So essentially, it's an OTT skill. You look at your top 2, kind of like this. You decide what you do. You can call one out to the board, or you can choose to do nothing and just leave them exactly the same and put it back on top. AKA, you can stack your heals, your crits, over trigger if you're playing this in premium, whatever you want. You can choose to do that. It's the top 2, and you just do whatever you want. So to kind of give you an explanation, you heal, you give power, and you stack your top, all in pretty much one skill. And while that sounds like really, really busted, it does have some weaknesses in terms of its engine. Like the cards that go with it aren't as strong as this card itself. And keep in mind, this is a turn 2 card, essentially. While your defenses start on turn 1 of her turn, like meaning your first grade 3 turn, the actual healing doesn't start until your 2nd turn, which means if you go 2nd, you will not be healing, and you will probably die to your opponent pretty fast if they rush you to your death. And if you're going first, you have a higher chance of surviving, as you'll start healing healing a turn earlier. I do only run the Meer as a grade 3 and nothing else. So for that particular part, we'll only be having those grade 3s. But let's talk about our grade 2s because there's quite a lot to discuss here. We're gonna go ahead and start with filling Riviere. Petra is support for Meer. Essentially, this is what she looks like. And her skill says, Vanguard, when placed, you may soul blast 2 cards and pretty much search for a Meer and put it into your hand. So it's a very easy, just straight off the bat, Vanguard, you do it. You want to get to this card as soon as possible. Her Vanguard and Rearguard skill are both really good. Her Rearguard skill says when she attacks, if your card was put from your damage zone into your drop zone, she gets a guard restrict. Just a straight on guard restrict. Your opponent cannot call sentinels from their hand with this skill, which is really nice, as when you start actually healing with this card, this will be consistently active, and you'll see this pretty soon, as you can top deck it through your Meer, do all this cool stuff. I think my favorite part about this is that even if you heal, this does go off, meaning if you just regularly heal, it goes off. So what you can actually do is you can take damage early on and then heal through it, and then this will always pretty much be active on all of your turns. Murata. So Murata is a grade 2 fixer. Her skill says Vanguard, when placed, you may counterblast, look at top 7 cards of your deck, reveal a grade 2, and ride it. So essentially what happens is that you are fixing, you draw a card too. You draw a card as well. You draw a card, look at top 7. So essentially what you're doing is if you go into this and you miss your Petra, what you can do is that you can top 7, hope that you get it, and you ride into Petra instead and then get that skill to get your Meer. So that's pretty much, it fixes itself. Sadly, this card is completely dead as a rear guard, but she fixes your ride line if you need it fixed, and it is an extra soul, so it's not terrible, and we need soul in this deck really badly. Petra Soul Blast, Meer Soul Blast, you kind of want, and you need Soul Blast to do this top deck skill, so you want to make sure that you have soul, so she kind of helps with that a little bit. But like I said, she's Vanguard only skill. After that, she's pretty much a dead card. So Lieselot is mainly here not for her top skill. So her skill says on place, look at top card, call it or put it to soul. She is actually here for that soul. There will be situations where you'll literally be short a soul, and if you top deck her, you can actually use her skill and get that extra soul in. You can use her as an early rush if you think that you're gonna have no issues with your soul. If you see that, like, if you just see that you will have not a problem, because sometimes you can, if you have this, if you have Meer, you don't need to ride into Petra at all, and you can just miss that, skip that soul blast just so you have the extra 2 soul, and go work around it. But if you think you don't need it, you can just go into Lieselot normally and just do Lieselot things. Coral, this is Shiny Star Coral. Now Coral is literally in here for yet another soul charge. If you ride her first, it's great because that gets you 2 soul right into your soul, and I like that about her because you kind of need it. The other thing is that if in case you do happen to have enough soul and you don't want that, you don't need the soul as much, you can actually soul blast twice and give her 10k. So literally she becomes an extra 2 gifts from your little, gift stacking that you can do. She gives herself extra power essentially. And I think that's actually really nice because on your blow turns, like say you only have 1 Petra and you don't have another one, you can actually do Coral instead, and Coral gives you soul, and then on top of that, Coral herself will actually be higher in numbers, which makes your columns more lethal. This is a 3 attacking deck, so you want to make sure every single attack counts. Pearl Sisters Pearl, obviously I run the grade 1 as well. This is a very, very easy, this is a kind of tech, so you don't have to do this, but I run her because if she and the grade 1 are together, essentially she becomes a 30k rearguard with a crit, and the grade 1 I believe becomes a 28k rearguard with a crit as well. But I don't remember exactly off the top of my head the differences, but pretty much if you have both of them on the board, they both give each other skills, and which I mainly just run this as an extra beater, just an extra thing. And like I said, you go through your deck pretty fast. Chances are you'll probably see your Pearl Sisters relatively soon. Lastly, for our grade 2s, I actually run 1 vanilla. As I mentioned, you have to, if you're going second, you have to survive this deck. You have to survive as much as possible. So I actually run 1 vanilla. It's a 10k shield, 10k beat stick. We just need this just for a literal extra guard to deal with those aggro turns, to deal with just any form of aggression. You can take Pearl Sisters out and just run more vanillas or run extra Lieselot. It's completely up to you. I kind of like it like this, as I have both my beat stick engine, but I also have kind of my defensive engine as well. But that's our grade 2s. Let's go ahead and talk about our grade 1s. First, I always talk about this card because I think this card is just amazing, but it is for Redka, or its full name is Distinguished Wink Redka. Redka is an amazing card. I feel like this card is just so underrated and it just does so much for just what it is. So pretty much her first skill is Vanguard. When it attacks hits, you draw a card. So pretty much it's a good ride target. You draw an extra card. Usually if you're swinging at your opponent, chances are this will actually go through, especially if you have something in the back swinging with it like an Ellie. Chances are they'll probably let it go because they need the counterblast, but even though you get the draw, they'll need the counterblast. But if you put a booster behind this, your opponent may not want to commit to that, or they may want to pass it and it might go through. If anything, you're letting them guard an extra thing that they may not want to guard, as they may need the counterblast. I would be cautious with that Vanguard skill. There are situations where giving that counterblast is extremely painful and will kill you, so be cautious of when you want to go in with this skill. She does have a secondary rearguard skill. It says retire her. Once she's on board, just retire her. Look at top 2 cards, add 1 to hand, put 1 to your drop. This card's amazing, especially for setup for Meer. So say you look at your top 2 Meer and you just hate what's in there, or say it's something you need. Say there's a crit Citadel up there and you just need that 30k guard, or just whatever it is. Say you just want something out of that top deck. You can do that with this. Say these aren't triggers and they're just straight units. So you just retire her and you get those units. You drop 1, you pick the other one up to hand, and you could call it back out. Say in your top deck, in your top cards, you have like, I don't know, like a grade 2 and a grade 2, and one of them is a Petra and one of them is Lieselot. So you can pick up Petra and then you can get Lieselot with this card. So it pretty much lets you get both cards. Like you can essentially just kind of cycle through your engine really fast. Also, it can get you closer to a trigger, which means you can just easily, crit your opponent to death. So this card's just really solid. I think this card's gonna get a lot of decks, but in here it's like really nice. So I run 4 her. Next I run 4 Ellie. Ellie's pretty explanatory. I feel like a lot of people know what Ellie does now at this point because she's played in Prism. But pretty much her skill says when the attack and booster hits a Vanguard, you retire herself, search for a copy of yourself, put into your hand, and that's pretty much it. If she's on Vanguard, she doesn't retire. Her other skill is when she is placed on guard circle, you take another Ellie from your drop, put it to the bottom of your deck, and this card, the card that you're guarding with, will get an extra 10k, making her a 20k guard, which is pretty much a heal trigger guard, which is really good. As I mentioned, we really need ways to protect ourselves. This is one of the best cards to have that protection. So I think it's nice, just a solid way to just keep that flow going of just more protection. Another thing that's nice about this, she really bounces well with Redka. So Redka, your top 2 cards could be an Ellie. You can drop the Ellie, and if you already have an Ellie in your hand, you now have a 20k guard. Next we have some vanillas, because we do need some vanillas. As I mentioned, these are 15k grade 1 blocks. This is mid vocal Onir, and she's just, like I said, she doesn't have any skill, just a straight up 15k block. Like I said, we need 15k blocks a lot, and it may sound bad, but literally these get beefed up by Meer anyway, so it doesn't even matter. And then going on in, I run 2 Vanessa. Vanessa is just for that soul and the extra draw. Her skill says at the end of the battle it boosted, you pretty much you take a grade 3 or greater, put it at the bottom of your deck, put her into soul, and then you draw a card. So she lets you replenish that soul that you go through quite a lot. She also lets you draw a card, and you can replenish your Meers, which then you can later on shuffle or do whatever and get them back if you need to. You have that option. This doesn't really go off very often, but sometimes it does, and sometimes it's just nice to have. Next we have 1 Perfect Guard Sentinel. I run the grade 1 Perfect Guard Sentinel that says on Vanguard you draw, and then you draw again, and you discard. And I like this card just for the extra draw. I think it's very needed, and also it's just a Sentinel. Honestly, there's no other grade 1 that you really need except maybe like an extra copy of like your maybe like a vanilla or something. Honestly, like all these grade 1s are in a good spot. You can add another Vanessa, but Vanessa isn't really that commonly used. Maybe you could put Steza in. It's kind of up to you. But the thing is, you don't want to counterblast too much because your main counterblasting would be happening here, because you essentially counterblast twice with this card alone. But because you're healing, you're essentially counterblasting once. But still, you counterblast quite a lot, so you don't want to use your counterblast too much. And that being said, I don't think there's any other grade 1 that you can really run that can make this better. Like, so I threw in the Sentinels just to make my triggers a little bit easier to access through. And of course, the last grade 1 matches with their Pearl sister. This is Pearly in same condition. She gets 18k and a crit if her grade 2 sister is on the board, and the grade 2 gets the 20k and a crit if her grade 1 sister is on the board. So you can have a very, very meaty board. You can have both of them out. They both attack. And actually, I didn't know this until recently, but that power that they get stays. Like, your opponent literally can't hit them unless they just retire them. They actually become, their bases become that power. Of course, you want to run 4 heals, as healing is kind of one of the main parts of this engine, and we'll talk about kind of the heals, what you can do with them in a little bit here. But essentially, you can have your opponent rush you and then just heal through the entire game if you want. You can do some crazy shenanigans. You can actually potentially heal up to like 7-8 times if you're really lucky, but it doesn't happen too often. But anyway, then we have I run 2 draw but sentinels, and then I run 1 crit sentinel, as I do think crits are a little bit necessary. Also, this is just a nice 30k guard. Like I said, you could see it in your top deck with red cut, and honestly, I would just pick it up at that point instead of dropping it. And you can just pick her up, and then you have your 30k block. I just think 30k is a just nice number to block. It deals with a lot of pressure that a lot of cards tend to give you. I just think it's nice. Next, we do have some crits here. I have a total of 6 crits. Crits are nice, obviously, so we have 7 in here. You kind of need crits. You want to kill your opponent. Sadly, if I could, I'd probably run, more crits, but unfortunately, we can't get away with that with this deck because you do need a pretty decent hand to be able to survive your opponent's attack, so that way you can tempo it out, so that way you can kill them back. I run lastly draws. Of course, like I said, we need the draws, but essentially your engine is that you have to tempo out how you want to play out the game, and hopefully draw into decent pieces, but you want to be able to survive long enough to the point where you're unkillable. So you can go Force 1 or Force 2 in this deck. Honestly, it's kind of up to you where your opponent is at on their damage. So what I usually do is I usually go Force 2 to force my opponent to have to think about swinging dealing with my Vanguard attack. So what happens is your rear guards always get so much power off of Meer that going Force 2 makes it really awesome because you have 28k, 38k columns. On top of the fact that it's a Force 2, so your opponent has to take 2 damage essentially, and then if you have the guard restrict, then they have to guard restrict take 2 damage. It's really nice. However, you can go Force 1 and stack it on your Vanguard and then make that like your big boy, because your Vanguard is the only one that isn't getting power, and if you don't have a booster behind, your Vanguard will be a constant 13k attacking. So you can go Force 1 and force your opponent to have to worry about all the columns essentially. And like I said, your markers don't stack like too crazy in this deck. Like you probably will at max maybe ride twice. If you're really lucky, you might ride all 4 of your Meers, but chances are that won't happen. So you're usually looking at about between 1 to 3 force markers, in a game, something like that. But anyway, so you can go into Force 1 and just stack it on your Vanguard and make every single attack just pretty much be like a 28k and above attack, or you can choose to go Force 2 and put it on your rear guards and make all your attacks potentially lethal as well that way. It is kind of up to you. If you see that you pushed your opponent to 3 damage early, going Force 2 will probably be the better option, as it makes pretty much every attack kind of lethal. But if you see that your opponent's kind of low on damage, something like that, you may want to go Force 1, not push them too much, maybe try to heal through the game enough to where you just get too big. But it's kind of up to you. You can either one works, and they're extremely situational. It is just really up to what's going on in the game, how much you healed, how your stack's doing, all that kind of stuff. If you got me to your Meers in time, the more Meers the merrier. But yeah, that's pretty much kind of like the synergy there. You can kind of choose. Okay, so I'm kind of back here. I kind of set up a nice board for us. This is kind of like your ideal board, kind of what you want to see, pretty much like as much as possible. So you have your 2 Petras out, you have your 2 gift markers in hand, and you're pretty much just going on onslaught here. So you can like honestly just go in with your Vanguard right here, and your battle is already active. So you reveal your 2 markers, you counterblast to heal a card, right? And now all your rear guards have power. So like this has an extra 10. This has an extra 10, this is an extra 10, this is an extra 10, this has an extra 10. And then when your opponent has to worry about your columns here, which are now Force 2 numbers, right? So your opponent has to be and these have sentinel restricts on them, because you will be healing, as we did heal, since we did put a card from here to here, these sentinel restricts are active. So your opponent really has to decide kind of like what to do in this situation. You can do your drive check, do whatever, oh my god, a crit, do the usual, and then you kind of separate it. If you can keep this kind of board going every single turn, chances are your opponent will die. They can't handle this too many times before they die, and if you happen to survive another turn, then you're gonna have now 30k added power, because these will each be 15, and if you survive another turn, these will each be 20, and so on and so forth. Even with 1 marker, each of these get 10. Each column gets plus 10 essentially. You can just make that engine just extremely brutal. You can also, like I mentioned earlier, you can have one side be a Coral and one side be a Petra, and you can Soul Blast with Coral to give her an extra 10k, which will just, so say if you are at your 2 gift markers, say you're like this column will already be like super annoying to deal with, because it'll be 18 28s, 38s, 48s, and then that's before drive check, right? So it's something to keep in mind. There really isn't too many other plays you could do aside from this. Like I said, you can go into Force 1 as well and just stack it on your Vanguard, because as I mentioned, your Vanguard gets kind of small, but with the extra Force, you can make it just really beefy. And then these are already going to be beefy, so your opponent will probably end up saying no guard to this a lot more often. Now, something I do want to keep in mind is keep track of how you're healing. What I mean is that keep track of how much damage your opponent has versus how much damage you have. Usually 9 out of 10 times, like early on, you want to have more damage than your opponent. And the reason why I say this is if you have more damage, it increases your chances of healing. It means that you will last in the game a lot longer. So you can take some early damage, like kind of like mid to early like damage, and then after that you can start healing. Just be cautious. I recommend staying around 3 and keeping your opponent around 2, and then you can kind of start going on these weird things. Like you can just like you can heal and then heal again. Like you can just, it'll increase your chances of healing, which means you can potentially heal twice in one turn, and you can keep doing that. So like just something to keep in mind. Just keep in mind of your damage. That's why sometimes going Force 1 is better, as it lowers the chance of your opponent being at higher damage than you. You will consistently keep healing after your turn 2 of being on Meer, but you want to actually, if you want to increase your chance of healing, if you have slightly more damage than your opponent, then you'll be healing on the turns that you don't have this active, which just increases your odds of surviving. Your opponent puts you to 5, then you can heal back all the way to 3. It's kind of funny, but that's just something to keep in mind. That's probably the biggest advice I could give with this deck, is just keep it cautious. So I'm back, and you guys saw the Meer list, and I really hope you liked the Meer list. I think it's super fun. I think it's just a fun mechanic. Honestly, I think the deck has a lot of potential, and maybe with the new stuff coming out with the Keel Guardians, it'll have even more potential as the survivability of the deck will go up. We also actually got some cards that you can actually throw into Meer that'll make the survivability rate go even higher. So there's a chance that Meer might actually have a chance to be an even better deck. It's kind of hard to say. I haven't playtested with the Keel Guardians, nor have I playtested with the grade 1, but there's a grade 1 that says I believe you have two or more force markers, they can intercept, they get an extra 5k, which is actually really good in a deck like this, because you can just intercept with it and then like have an extra guard on the field essentially. So I think it's kind of nice. I recently posted a picture of my swimsuit version of my SP Meer, and actually got a lot of people asking me questions, which is awesome. I'm glad you guys are interested in the deck. So here it is. Hope this is a good profile for you. I highly recommend checking it out. It's super cheap to build, and have Meer give you presents as you have a blast getting through your opponent with your very beefy rear guards. But in that, guys, thank you for watching. It's been real. It's been fun. As always, thank you for all the support. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you guys in a future video. He's ready. He's rolling. He's ready. He's here. He's buff. He's doing his thing, as always. But yeah, thank you. Peace out, guys. Das svidanya. See you guys next time. Bye!